My name is Dorothy Miller, and at 72 years old, I never imagined I'd be sitting here telling you about the most satisfying revenge of my life. When my daughter-in-law tried to throw me out of what she thought was her house, she had no idea she was about to learn the hardest lesson of her entitled life. Before I tell you how I turned the tables on someone who treated me like garbage in my own home, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. And if you've ever been disrespected by family members who thought they could walk all over you, hit that like button, because this story will remind you that justice always finds a way. Let me take you back to where this whole mess started, in my beautiful colonial house in Westfield, New Jersey. I built this life with my late husband Frank over 45 years of marriage. Frank was a hard-working man who started as a construction worker and eventually owned his own company, Miller Construction. We saved every penny, worked double shifts, and sacrificed vacations to buy our dream home on Maple Street, a gorgeous 4-bedroom colonial with a wraparound porch and the kind of white picket fence you see in movies. Frank and I raised our only son Michael in that house. We watched him take his first steps on the hardwood floors we'd refinished ourselves, celebrated his high school graduation in the backyard, and cried tears of joy when he got his acceptance letter to Rutgers University. That house wasn't just where we lived, it was where we poured our hearts, our savings, and our dreams. When Frank passed away 3 years ago from a sudden heart attack, I thought my world had ended. 45 years of marriage, and suddenly I was alone in that big house with nothing but memories and the echo of his laughter in the empty rooms. Michael, bless his heart, immediately offered to move back home to take care of me. "Mom, you shouldn't be alone," he said during the funeral reception, his eyes red from crying. "Let me and Jessica come stay with you for a while." Jessica, my daughter-in-law of 2 years. I'd tried so hard to like her, I really had. But from the moment Michael brought her home, something about her just rubbed me the wrong way. Maybe it was how she'd walk through my house touching everything with this calculating look in her eyes. Maybe it was how she'd rearrange my furniture without asking, claiming she was just helping to modernize the space. Or maybe it was the way she'd roll her eyes whenever Michael and I shared memories about his father. But Michael loved her, and that's all that mattered to me. If she made my son happy, I was willing to overlook her flaws and try to build a relationship with her. Looking back now, I should have trusted my instincts. The first few months after they moved in weren't terrible. Jessica kept to herself mostly, spending her days online shopping or talking on the phone with her friends about their upcoming wedding plans. She'd just gotten engaged to Michael right before Frank died, and she was obsessed with planning what she called the wedding of the century. I tried to be supportive. I offered to help with the planning, shared stories about my own wedding, even offered to pay for the flowers as my contribution. But Jessica made it clear she didn't want my old-fashioned input. "No offense, Dorothy," she said one afternoon while scrolling through her laptop, "but weddings have evolved since the 1970s. I'm going for something more sophisticated." Michael was working long hours trying to keep his father's construction business running while dealing with his grief. He'd leave early in the morning and come home exhausted, barely noticing the growing tension between Jessica and me. I didn't want to burden him with our petty disagreements when he was already struggling with so much. But the petty disagreements soon became major battles. It started with small things. Jessica would blast her music while I was trying to watch my afternoon shows. She'd leave dirty dishes in the sink for days, claiming she was too busy with wedding planning to clean up. She'd invite her friends over without asking me, and they'd treat my living room like their personal hangout spot, putting their feet up on my coffee table and leaving rings on the wood from their wine glasses. When I gently brought up these issues, Jessica would sigh dramatically and say things like, "Dorothy, you need to learn to adapt. This isn't just your house anymore." That should have been my first red flag right there. But I bit my tongue because I didn't want to cause problems for Michael. The breaking point came 6 months after they'd moved in. I'd been planning to redecorate the guest bathroom. It still had the same wallpaper Frank and I had put up in 1985, and I thought it was time for a change. I'd spent weeks looking at paint samples and had finally settled on a nice sage green that would complement the existing fixtures. I came home from my weekly grocery shopping to find Jessica in the bathroom with 2 men in work clothes tearing down my wallpaper. "What's going on here?" I asked, my arms full of grocery bags. Jessica barely looked up from her phone where she was showing the workers pictures of what she wanted. "Oh good, you're back. I'm having the bathroom redone. That wallpaper was so dated it was embarrassing." I stood there in shock. You're redecorating my bathroom without asking me? Our bathroom, she corrected, still not looking at me. And I'm not asking, I'm telling. This needed to be done. The workers looked uncomfortable, clearly sensing the tension. One of them, an older man with kind eyes, cleared his throat. Ma'am, maybe we should come back when you've had a chance to discuss this? No, Jessica said firmly. Keep working. Dorothy, can we talk privately? She followed me to the kitchen, and I could tell by the set of her jaw that this wasn't going to be a pleasant conversation. Listen, she said, leaning against my kitchen counter like she owned the place. I think it's time we established some ground rules here. Ground rules? I repeated, barely able to believe what I was hearing. Yes, Michael and I are building a life together, and we need space to do that. You hovering around, commenting on everything we do, trying to control how we live, it's not working. I felt my face get hot. I'm not trying to control anything. This is my house, Jessica. I'm simply asking to be consulted before you make major changes. She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Your house? Dorothy, you're 72 years old and living on Social Security. Michael is the one paying all the bills now. Michael is the one keeping this place running. This is his house now, which makes it my house too. The words hit me like a slap. Yes, Michael had been helping with some of the larger expenses since Frank died, but I had my own income, my own savings. I wasn't some charity case. That's not true, and you know it, I said, my voice shaking with anger. Frank and I worked our whole lives for this house. Frank is dead, Jessica said coldly, and you're getting older every day. Michael and I need to think about our future, not be tied down taking care of someone who should probably be in a nursing home anyway. I stared at her, unable to process what she'd just said. My own daughter-in-law had just suggested I belonged in a nursing home. Before I could respond, Michael walked through the front door, calling out his usual, "Honey, I'm home." He stopped short when he saw the expression on my face. "What's wrong?" he asked, looking between Jessica and me. Jessica immediately switched on her sweetest smile. "Oh, nothing serious. Your mom and I were just discussing some redecorating plans. Right, Dorothy?" She was giving me a look that clearly said, "Don't you dare tell him what I really said." I wanted to tell Michael everything. I wanted to explain how his wife had just disrespected me in the most hurtful way possible. But looking at my son's tired face, seeing the stress lines that had appeared since his father's death, I couldn't bring myself to add to his burden. "That's right," I said quietly. "Just discussing plans." But that night, as I lay in bed listening to Jessica and Michael argue in hushed tones in their room down the hall, I knew things were about to get much worse. The next few weeks proved me right. Jessica became bolder in her disrespect, acting like she was the lady of the house and I was just an unwelcome guest. She'd rearrange my furniture when I wasn't home. She'd throw away my belongings, claiming they were clutter. She even had the nerve to tell me that my afternoon soap operas were too loud and I needed to watch them in my bedroom instead of the living room. But the final straw came on a Tuesday morning in October. I'd gotten up early as usual to make breakfast and found Jessica sitting at my kitchen table with a stack of papers and her laptop open. "Perfect timing," she said without looking up. "I need you to sign these." I moved closer to see what she was talking about. The papers were official-looking documents with a lot of legal language I didn't understand. "What are these?" I asked. "Power of attorney forms," she said matter-of-factly. "Michael and I have been talking, and we think it's time to make some legal arrangements for your future care." My blood went cold. My future care? Dorothy, let's be realistic here. You're 72, you're showing signs of confusion lately. Michael is worried about you making important decisions on your own. "I am not confused," I said, my voice rising, "and I certainly don't need you making decisions for me." Jessica sighed like she was dealing with a difficult child. "This is exactly what I'm talking about. You're being irrational. These forms just give Michael legal authority to help manage your finances and healthcare decisions. It's for your own good." I grabbed the papers and read through them more carefully. These weren't just simple power of attorney forms. They would give Michael complete control over my bank accounts, my investments, even my house. "I'm not signing these," I said firmly. Jessica's fake sweetness evaporated instantly. Yes, you are. Michael and I have already discussed this. It's what's best for everyone. Where is Michael? I demanded. I want to talk to him about this myself. He's already at work. He asked me to handle this because he knew you'd get emotional and difficult about it. That was a lie, and I knew it. Michael would never make a decision like this without talking to me first. This was all Jessica's doing. I said no, and I mean no, I repeated, tearing the papers in half. Jessica's face went bright red with anger. She stood up so fast her chair fell backward. You stubborn old woman, she screamed. Do you have any idea how generous Michael and I have been, letting you stay here? Do you think we want to be stuck taking care of some cranky old lady when we should be starting our own lives? This is my house, I shouted back. I'm not some burden you're stuck with. Your house? Jessica laughed harshly. You can't even afford to keep up with the mortgage payments. Michael is the one paying for everything now. This house belongs to him, which means it belongs to me, and I am sick and tired of pretending otherwise. Get out, I said quietly. What? I said get out of my house, right now. Jessica stared at me for a moment, then grabbed her purse and headed for the door. But before she left, she turned back with a vicious smile. Fine, I'll go stay at my mother's for a few days. But when I come back, things are going to be very different around here. Michael and I have been talking about your living situation, and we've decided it's time for you to move somewhere more appropriate for someone your age. The door slammed behind her, and I stood alone in my kitchen, shaking with rage and hurt. But more than anything, I was confused. What did she mean about mortgage payments? Frank and I had paid off this house 15 years ago. There was no mortgage. That afternoon, I called my lawyer, Robert Chen, who had handled all of Frank's estate planning. I'd known Robert for 20 years. He'd helped us with everything from buying the house to setting up our wills. Dorothy, he said warmly when his secretary put me through. How are you holding up? I'm confused about something, Robert, and I need your help understanding what's going on. I explained Jessica's claims about mortgage payments and Michael paying for everything. Robert was quiet for a long moment. Dorothy, are you somewhere private where we can talk freely? Yes, I'm alone. I think you need to come to my office today. There are some things we need to discuss about your financial situation and the deed to your house. 2 hours later, I was sitting in Robert's office feeling like the biggest fool in New Jersey. Dorothy, Robert said gently, I need to ask you directly. Did you give Michael permission to take out a second mortgage on your house? My heart stopped. What second mortgage? Robert pulled out a thick file and spread several documents across his desk. According to these records, a second mortgage was taken out on your property 6 months ago for $180,000. Michael's name is on the loan as a co-borrower, but the house is listed as collateral. I stared at the papers, recognizing Michael's signature, but not understanding how this was possible. How could he do this without my permission? The house is in my name. Actually, Robert said carefully, it's not anymore. According to these transfer documents, you signed the house over to Michael 3 months after Frank died. Your signature is notarized right here. He showed me a document that made my stomach drop. There was my signature, clear as day, transferring ownership of my house to my son. I never signed this, I whispered. Robert, I swear to you, I never signed anything like this. Robert studied the document more closely, then looked at me with concern. Dorothy, do you remember signing any papers for Michael around that time? Maybe he told you they were insurance forms or something related to Frank's estate? And then it hit me. About 3 months after Frank's funeral, Michael had brought me a stack of papers he said were related to updating the beneficiaries on Frank's life insurance policies. I'd been so grief-stricken and overwhelmed that I'd just signed where he told me to sign without reading everything carefully. He lied to me, I said, my voice barely audible. My own son lied to me and stole my house. Robert leaned back in his chair, his expression grim. There's more, Dorothy. The second mortgage payments are 3 months behind. If they're not brought current soon, the bank can foreclose on the property. The room started spinning. Not only had my son stolen my house, but he was about to lose it entirely. And Jessica had known all of this when she was trying to get me to sign those power of attorney forms. They weren't trying to help me. They were trying to cover up their own financial mess. What can I do? I asked desperately. Robert was quiet for a long moment, studying the documents. Then he looked up with something that might have been hope in his eyes. Well, there's something interesting here. While Michael did get you to sign the transfer papers, there's a technical issue with the notarization. The notary's commission had expired 2 weeks before the date on this document. What does that mean? It means the transfer isn't legally valid. In the eyes of the law, you still own this house, Dorothy. Michael has been making mortgage payments on a property he doesn't actually have legal ownership of. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe again. So, what do I do now? Robert smiled. Now we fix this mess, and we make sure your son and his fiancée understand exactly who they've been dealing with. The next morning, I was sitting at my kitchen table when Michael and Jessica came home from wherever they'd spent the night. Jessica walked in first, looking smug and confident. Michael followed behind her, looking uncomfortable and avoiding my eyes. "Dorothy," Jessica announced, "we need to talk." "Yes," I agreed calmly. "We certainly do." Jessica sat down across from me while Michael hovered awkwardly by the kitchen counter. "I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday," Jessica continued, "and I've decided to be generous. Instead of having you move to a nursing home immediately, I'm willing to let you stay in the guest bedroom while we look for a nice assisted living facility." I nodded thoughtfully. "That's very generous of you, Jessica. And in return, what exactly would you like from me?" "Well, obviously you'd need to sign over any remaining financial assets to Michael for safekeeping, and you'd need to follow our house rules. No more interference with how we choose to live our lives." "Our lives?" I repeated. "In our house." "Exactly." Jessica smiled triumphantly. I stood up and walked to the kitchen drawer where I kept important papers. I pulled out the folder Robert had given me the day before and set it on the table. "Before I agree to anything," I said, "I think we should clear up some confusion about exactly whose house this is." Jessica glanced at the folder dismissively. "What's to clear up? Michael owns this house now." "Actually," I said, opening the folder and spreading the documents across the table, "he doesn't." Michael's face went white as he recognized the legal papers. Jessica looked confused, clearly not understanding what she was looking at. "You see," I continued, "when Michael had me sign what he claimed were insurance papers after his father's death, the notary's commission had expired. That makes the property transfer null and void." "What property transfer?" Jessica demanded, but her voice had lost its confident edge. I handed her the deed transfer documents. "The ones where Michael tricked me into signing my house over to him so he could take out a second mortgage without my knowledge." Jessica's face went through a series of expressions: confusion, disbelief, and finally, growing panic as she realized what she was reading. "Michael," she said slowly, "what is she talking about?" Michael finally spoke, his voice barely above a whisper. "I can explain." "Oh, please do," I said, settling back in my chair. "I'd love to hear you explain how you forged legal documents to steal your own mother's house." The next hour was perhaps the most satisfying 60 minutes of my life. Michael, faced with the evidence and Robert Chen's legal opinion, had no choice but to confess everything. The business was struggling. He'd made some bad investments. He'd gotten in over his head with credit card debt trying to pay for Jessica's expensive lifestyle and wedding plans. "I was going to pay it back," he kept saying. "I never meant for you to lose the house, Mom. I just needed some quick cash to get back on my feet." Jessica, meanwhile, was becoming more hysterical by the minute as she realized her comfortable life was crashing down around her. "You told me the house was yours!" she screamed at Michael. "You told me your mother was just staying here temporarily until we found her a nursing home." "I never said that," Michael protested weakly. "Yes, you did. You said she was getting senile, and we needed to take control of her finances before she lost everything." As they argued, I made some phone calls, first to the bank, to inform them that the second mortgage had been taken out fraudulently and I would be disputing it, then to my insurance company to report the fraud, and finally, to Robert Chen, to begin the process of having Michael removed from any claims to my property. When I hung up from that last call, Jessica and Michael were staring at me in silence. "So," I said pleasantly, "let's talk about those house rules you mentioned, Jessica." "Mom," Michael started, "please, we can work this out." "No," I said firmly. We can't. Michael, you stole from me. You lied to me. You were going to let me lose my home, the home your father and I worked our entire lives to build, because you couldn't manage your own finances. I turned to Jessica. And you treated me like garbage in my own house. You tried to have me declared incompetent so you could steal what little I had left. You talked about putting me in a nursing home like I was some unwanted pet you needed to get rid of. Jessica had the nerve to look indignant. I was trying to help. You're old and confused and— I'm not confused, I interrupted. I'm angry. There's a difference. I stood up and walked to the front door, opening it wide. Now, let me explain the new house rules. This is my house. My name is on the deed, my name is on the property taxes, and my name is going to stay on everything related to this property. You have until Friday to pack your belongings and get out. You can't kick us out, Jessica shrieked. We have nowhere to go. You should have thought of that before you decided to steal from me, I replied calmly. Michael looked devastated. Mom, please. I'm your son. Yes, you are. And that makes what you did even worse. I felt tears threatening, but I refused to let them fall. If you had come to me and explained that you were in financial trouble, I would have helped you. I would have done anything for you, Michael. But instead, you chose to lie to me, steal from me, and let your fiancé treat me like trash in my own home. What about the wedding? Jessica wailed. What about our plans? I almost laughed. Even facing homelessness, she was worried about her party. I suggest you figure that out somewhere else, I said. You have until Friday. They left that afternoon, Jessica still screaming threats about lawyers and lawsuits that we all knew she couldn't afford. Michael just looked broken, and part of me felt sorry for him, but not sorry enough to change my mind. The next few days were blissfully quiet. I changed the locks just in case and spent my time reclaiming my house. I threw away all the changes Jessica had made, moved my furniture back where I wanted it, and finally finished painting that guest bathroom the sage green I'd originally chosen. On Thursday, the day before their deadline, Michael came back alone. He looked like he'd aged 10 years in 3 days. Can we talk? He asked quietly when I answered the door. I let him in, but we stayed in the front hall. I wasn't ready to welcome him back into the heart of my home. I broke up with Jessica, he said without preamble. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, and I meant it. Despite everything, I'd never wanted to see my son hurt. Are you? Because she was right about some things. I have been struggling financially. The business is failing, and I was desperate. When I saw how much equity was in the house. You saw an opportunity to steal from your mother, I finished. He winced. I never thought of it that way. I was going to pay it back, I swear. With what money, Michael? You just said the business is failing. He didn't have an answer for that. I'm going to lose everything, he said quietly. The business, the truck, probably my credit. I'll have to start over from nothing. Good, I said, surprising him. Maybe starting over will teach you something about honesty and hard work that your father and I apparently failed to instill in you. We stood in silence for a moment. Finally, Michael asked, Do you think you'll ever be able to forgive me? I considered the question carefully. Maybe someday, but not today. And not until you've proven that you understand why what you did was so wrong. I do understand, he insisted. No, you don't. If you understood, you would have come to me when you first got into trouble instead of deciding to steal from me. If you understood, you would have stood up to Jessica when she was treating me badly instead of pretending not to notice. If you understood, you would have put your mother's well-being above your own financial problems. Michael's eyes filled with tears. I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry. I know you are. But sorry doesn't give me back the 3 months I spent thinking I was losing my mind. Sorry doesn't undo the humiliation of being treated like a burden in my own home. And sorry doesn't erase the fact that my own son was willing to steal from me. He nodded, accepting my words even though they clearly hurt. The house will always be your inheritance when I'm gone, I told him. But I'm very much alive, and this is very much my home. When you're ready to accept that and treat me with the respect I deserve, maybe we can start rebuilding our relationship. Michael left without another word, and I haven't seen him since. I hear through mutual friends that he's living in a small apartment across town, working construction for someone else's company while his own business went through bankruptcy. Jessica, meanwhile, moved back in with her parents and has been telling anyone who will listen that I'm a crazy old woman who ruined her life. Let her talk. I'm 72 years old, I own my house free and clear, and I'm finally getting the respect I deserve. My real friends, the ones who've known me for decades, rallied around me when they heard what happened. My neighbor Margaret brings me fresh vegetables from her garden. My friend Louise and I have started a weekly bridge game. My church group has welcomed me back with open arms after I'd withdrawn during those difficult months with Jessica. I'm not lonely, I'm not confused, and I'm certainly not helpless. I'm a woman who worked hard her entire life, who loved her husband for 45 years, who raised a son and thought she'd taught him right from wrong. I made mistakes, trusting too easily, signing papers without reading them carefully, putting up with disrespect to keep peace in the family. But I won't make those mistakes again. Sometimes I wonder if things could have been different. If I'd stood up to Jessica sooner, if I'd questioned Michael's financial help more closely, if I'd trusted my instincts instead of trying so hard to be understanding. But I can't change the past. All I can do is protect my future. And that's exactly what I've done. I've updated my will to leave the house to my church instead of Michael, at least for now. I've given Robert Chen power of attorney with explicit instructions that no one else is ever to have access to my finances without his approval. And I've installed a security system that alerts both me and the police if anyone tries to enter my home without permission. I'm not bitter, despite what this story might make you think. I'm just smarter now. I've learned that being family doesn't give someone the right to take advantage of you. I've learned that being elderly doesn't make you helpless. And I've learned that sometimes the people who claim to love you the most are the ones who will hurt you the deepest if you let them. But I've also learned that it's never too late to stand up for yourself. It's never too late to demand respect. And it's never too late to take back control of your own life. Have you ever had family members who tried to take advantage of you? Have you ever been in a situation where someone thought they could push you around because of your age or circumstances? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And remember, no matter how old you are, no matter how vulnerable someone tries to make you feel, you have the right to be treated with dignity and respect in your own home. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Thank you for listening to my story. If it helped even one person recognize that they deserve better treatment from their family, then sharing it was worth every difficult moment.